Sam Lee, welcome to Wilderness Farm. This is the first time we've met in person. A few voice notes and some connections in common, but thank you so much for making it here in the middle of, which we'll hear about later, a very busy time for you.
Yeah, it was so great to come and see somebody else's land in springtime, in the kind of the energetic surging of this time of year does. It's looking beautiful out there.
And I can't believe you actually know Copsale, which is not even a village. It's kind of a hamlet south of Horsham. But you've got to tell us the thing you told me earlier. It's an amazing way to know a place.
Well, it's always the great thing about Sussex. I mean, this is if you spend enough time pilgrimaging around, you end up getting to know bits of places, but you don't often think, oh, I'm going there. I know. So it's driving to your place here this morning. I realised the nearest spot is Copsale. I run the Turtle Dove pilgrimage from Rusper, which is about 10 miles north, to Netbury Wilding Estate, which is about 12 miles south. It's about the halfway point, I think. And one year we stopped by the Copsale Village Hall. They were having their fete. We were like, us pilgrims, like, oh my God, community and a party. And we just sort of invited ourselves in and ended up singing our Turtle Dove folk song that they knew about us. So we had this wonderful, like, welcoming from the locals.
It's amazing.
We sang for them and they cheered, and we sat on the veranda and they gave us sausage sandwiches and things like that.
Well, I'm glad they were welcoming. It's an amazing way to get to know a place. And thank you so much for figuring out what species of pine tree we actually have on the land, the big tree. You used your wizardry app. What was it called again?
That's iNaturalist.
iNaturalist.
Yeah. But I guessed it was a Monterey pine.
You did, to be fair.
And it's proved me that I'm likely right. But they're very, they're very stately and very, they're hard to kind of misidentify. I'm sure there are subspecies that I should know better about, but.
No, I love that, and I love California, so I'm glad to have that anecdotal kind of
West Coast
connection
vibes happening on your bit of Sussex clay.
Exactly. Well, before we get too far into it, the way that we like to start things in a slightly more imaginative place, let's say, is to play a little game. So I've got two kinds of cards here. I've got some cards with some shapes on them, and I've got some cards with some numbers on them.
Okay.
And you can pick, if you like, 3 cards.
Yeah.
And just turn them over and just sit with them for a minute and just see how they combine or don't combine for you, and see if it reminds you of some sort of slightly random moment you might have encountered at some point, and just see where we go from there. It's a way of getting to know you without kind of having a script, without going through the usual kind of who are you, what have you done in the world, that kind of thing.
This people is like can opening the little cubby holes in me and going, and you might get some major trauma. I might start confessing some terrible. Well, if it goes too
if it goes too deep, then we'll go straight on down to see a proper therapist. But this is just a chance to. It might be something joyful. It might be something little. It might be nothing at all. But let's crack that door open and see what we find.
Can't wait.
So, do you want
to have to
you can choose whether
I shuffle them or no.
You've got some number cards and some shape cards, so you pick what you fancy.
All right. Well, this is close to tarot in some ways, so I'm going to do the kind of
spreading them out.
Spread them out. Oh, look at that.
So we've got what have we got there?
Let's close
for those that are listening through podcasting platforms.
The cross or art.
Well, it's the cross. Well, as you like, whatever's on there.
70. Keep it as the cross. Time. Powerful stuff. 70. Okay, actually, this is really, really significant. Really significant. So 4 scores and 10.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've heard that before.
4 scores and 10. Jesus's cross and time. My journey to folk music came from my encounter with a very, very important man who really took me on the path that I was meant to be. He was a Scottish traveller called Stanley Robertson, and he was a man who was, this is so beautiful. So he was a man that for the 4 years that I knew him, his ambition was to live to 70.
Wow.
And that was the age that he died at.
Wow.
As was the ambition of the Travellers. If you could live to 70, that was a great age. They were not a community that had great health, suffered very badly, and didn't have great access to health either by nature of their demographic and society. And he died at age 70. Stanley had grown up in the Traveller community, which is an ancient indigenous nomadic people of Scotland, some say pre-Celtic, ancient carriers of wisdom of the land and the law and the ballads and the stories. And although he was a man of timelessness, so he was a time traveller very much. He would reach into the ancient world and would speak and sing and evoke and communicate with the ancestors, was part of the community's incredible psychic capabilities.
Wow.
There is an amazing story I might share about how he died and came back to life.
Wow.
What I will
keep
say,
going.
What I will say, I'll come back to times last, but one of the things that he married within his ancient indigenous cultural way was that he was also a devout Latter-day Saint.
Oh, right.
High priest in the church.
Wow.
And so Christianity was massive for him, even though he had this very ambiguous relationship with a very serious denomination that were very hardline about how they incorporated what he called the dark arts and the supernatural. He was a witch by their man, even though he was very powerful and worked his way up the church. He was also a man who dabbled with the dark arts because he could read the future. He was deeply psychic.
Wow.
He saw ghosts on a regular basis and would tell what possessions there were in houses. This was not okay by the Latter-day Saints.
Yeah.
But his great skill was being able to astral travel and communicate with the elders. In fact, when I first met him, he had a heart attack and a stroke and was unconscious in bed, and they were about to switch the machine off, thinking that was it for Stanley. And he knew he hadn't passed on his lore, L-O-R-E lore. So he went back to the ancestors to retrieve the songs and the wisdom that he knew needed to be remembered and passed on. And in the weeks that he was unconscious, reclaimed an enormous amount of material, and then woke up and got out of bed to the total astonishment of all the medical staff and doctors who had written him off. And then I had 3.5, 4 years left with him to be the inheritor of that culture. And so I feel like we cheated time a little bit.
Wow.
And wear his ring to the day as the keeper of the law of his law and passer of his traditions.
Unbelievable.
you,
Sam, that's amazing. I've got a couple of questions if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Stanley
Robertson.
So when you met him in or around that hospital, obviously the things you're describing there are out there, time travel, psychic capabilities. We're talking about significant powers. Where were you at in your life when you encountered him? Were you on a path already where this kind of stuff felt normal to you, or did this seem like crazy as he began to share his stuff? Or where were you at when you met him? Was it accidental meeting, or was it?
So I knew of Stanley because I listened to recordings of him. His aunt, Jeannie Robertson, was one of the most famous singers that has ever been recorded. She's often considered one of the greatest voices ever heard. The ballad, the keeper of ballads and operatic-like voice, travelled across America and Britain, was still a traveller and made a little bit of money from it. And so I knew of the family. I'd studied their songs, but recordings, and thought Stanley was long dead, like all of those sort of singers, as we call them. So when I walked into a little yacht club in Whitby at the Whitby Folk Festival, and he had been an invited guest, and heard him sing, I realized who he was and realized he was alive. And that was a kind of oh my God, one of those source singers is still here. We have one of those ancients that I'd heard about from the 1950s and 60s. I was on my journey. If I'd been learning folk songs off archival recordings, listening to those old voices, I'd also been training in wilderness studies. I'd been out been studying anthropology of indigenous communities and the kind of mythic, sort of psychogeographic relationship within different cultures around the world. I'd spent time in Pacific Northwest Coast, American Canada, learning indigenous traditions and cultures there. I've been very interested in that. What I've met in Stanley was somebody who was a representative of the ancient indigenous relationship of human culture relationship to land. And it was like, boom, here was somebody who had an intact, prolific and very powerful relationship to the land, because he'd lived off the land, he travelled,
and British land as well, not just elsewhere,
exactly,
not rainforests
of these islands. I mean, Scotland, northeast Scotland, is about as foreign as anywhere I have been. I remember turning up and not being able to understand a word that people were saying there, because it's an impenetrable language, the Doric, and he spoke the Cant as well, which is the Scottish language, the Scottish traveller language. So I realised I was in a very alien place, but you're 25, you learn fast. And so I realised that actually what he was doing was showing me something that I knew was there. I intrinsically knew that our folk songs were our connections to land, and that sense of sovereignty and identity, and our sense of indigeneity, which is a complex word in this country. And suddenly I had somebody I didn't realise this at the time, but here was proof that singing was not about trying to get a number one and make loads of money and grow your Facebook following or whatever Friendster at that
TikTok,
time.
whatever it is now.
What is now, but then Instagram and all that. And so I was, so I knew there was a bigger teaching here that nowhere else was going to offer me. Or had offered someone like me, a young, apprentice, ever.
And he had just had a big download.
Yeah.
So it was ripe for the apprenticing.
And when we met, he knew who I was.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Through his powers rather than Instagram.
Nobody knew who I was as a kid who just turned up at a festival. And he was like, he knew I was coming. He knew my name. He was like, "Aye, Samuel, I have a cassette for you." And he handed me this cassette that he'd recorded songs because he knew we were to meet.
Wow.
And I was like, this was a what the F moment. And he handed me this cassette, which was recorded at double time. So it's like this. I had to go and have it slowed down to learn these songs. And then he died. And then he came, and then I got in touch about he recovered. So there was this first meeting, and then this kind of, oh my God, he's gonna die, and I missed this moment. And then we had 3.5 years thereafter.
Wow.
To properly, what he did was not like, this is how you sing. It's, I'm taking you to the places the ballads are from. I'm going to take you to the land. I'm going to show you where we lived when we camped out. When we spent the summer walkers, as they were called, took me to the places where each song had happened, and there he would tell the story of the land. And we would go to, the Battle of Harlaw in like 1420, and he would sing the song, the ballad, the kind of 15-minute long ballad, and he would tell where all the tribes had fought, where the rivers of blood, he would animate the landscape as though it had happened last week and he'd sat there watching it. That's the sort of the intactness of how knowledge through the oral tradition was passed down from generation to generation without the fall, without the decay. So he had that voluminous.
So something about this form of singing evokes a present imagination of history in a way that is hard to replicate in another medium. Is that am I reaching at the right sort of?
Yeah, I mean, there weren't any other mediums, so this was the medium. the mediating, the meditation, the mindfulness. It's all about that. What does transmission mean? What does broadcast mean? All these terms that we've co-opted come from this, from the fact that when our antennae were firmly up and tuned in, we knew what was going on. We didn't need Facebook. We didn't need Twitter and all that stuff to know who had died, who was in need of help, where the opportunity was, where the harvest was, where the callings were, where the party was. You know, we knew. We were we were tuned in that way, and Stanley had that. And it's not just a what's happening now, it's what's happening ahead of us, what's happened before. It's a far more beautiful form of connectedness, and a far more beautiful form of following, and to be followed in that sense.
And before we move on to the sound that I'd love you to share with us, when you sing, what is it that you think you're doing then? Obviously you're singing, but what is it that you're seeking to bring about when you sing with people? I'm avoiding using the obvious analogies of like the transistor radio, of tuning in, that the song is always there, but it is an easy one to use. There's this thing that Stanley would teach me, and I kind of wholly believe in, and modern science is starting to indicate that this is very much the case. And actually working with bird song, you realize that actually this is the same energetic field, morphic resonance, if you want to borrow the Sheldrake's term, all different ways of saying. Stanley, who was not a scientist, would say, the songs aren't inside you, they're all around you, they're held, the ancestors are holding them there. When you sing, what you're doing is you inhale them, and then you're tuning in, and you're kind of activating maybe the word. So when I'm singing for myself, or for an audience, be that 20 people sitting around the campfire, or several hundred in a theatre, I'm doing the same. For me, I'm doing the same thing. Sometimes it's harder in the theatre because you've got to, but sometimes not actually, because what you're doing is you're using everybody in your space as part of that satellite dish, part of that attunement. And I am evoking something that Stanley called the Maisi, which is a word that exists in many different cultures. Like you have the duende from fado, from Portuguese fado singing, that shivers up the spine, that sense of feeling something magical happening. That evocation is what I am aiming for, to try and muster a sense of timelessness, a sense of connected to the ancestors, but not in a kind of old world, because I don't think of the ancestors as being from another time before us in that linear sense. It's a circularity, this idea that they are all there present with us. They're in a different situation, status, so whatever. So that's what singing for me is. And it's not that singing is about trying to connect in with that. That's part of the ingredients. It's also about narrativizing things that are very much in the present and the now, within the songs that speak about things that are about emotional complexities, about the universality of human concerns, and the conditions of what it means to be this species in these times, in these buildings, and doing the lives we lead, and what the footprints we walk in, but also I think it's very important to honor the fact that we are modern people that doing things very differently, but we have we have 1.5 million years of evolution into the bodies that we have, with the faculties that we have. So I think what I'm trying to do is just honor that we are capable of much more, and song has always been our way of practicing that. It's our oldest form of communication. It's where we hold a sense of allegiance and kinship, both with each other but also with the land, because we, for most of our time, have never been separated. And one of the reasons why I'm loving doing this podcast show, listening with, is because I've often described music as the thinnest thing. It's the thinnest art form, a very, layman way of getting at, poking at maybe some of the deep things that you're discussing. One of the things I love about what you said about the theatre, it points to what I know about your lifestyle, being in London, being in the woods, being a dual citizen. And, we talked as we walked up to the tree that I've been exploring this on and off grid living for quite a long time, and it slips on the scales. Get married, it kind of moves a bit towards the city and a bit towards trying to get some money in the door, and then hopefully I'll spend, keep going like this. But I find that wrestle to be a difficult one for me, but a beautiful one, and I'm always trying to make it 1 + 1 = 3, not 1 + 1 = 1.5. But just briefly, because we need to get back to the listening, and I feel like we could go off in 10 directions, but I really want to hear the sound that you've brought to us. But how do you find that tension?
Tension. I wouldn't have used that word. I think of it as a blessing, a total blessing that that I adore the city. I love the energy. I love the complexity. I love the ugly brutality of it. I like the possibility of it.
Yeah.
And I don't see as many differences as one might often think, that opportunity in the urban environment is so similar to the idea of opportunity when I'm out in the woods or on the land. The conversations that are going on, the sense of the wrestling, the bum fight, the turf wars apply equally to everywhere. The sense of of diversity. What I struggle with, and I say this because I have to live in London, and I have to live in one of the busiest, most exciting parts of London, which is Hackney, and I have to live out in very ecologically rich environments, because if I'm in suburbia or I'm in arable land, intensively agricultural dairy farmland, I go absolutely nuts because of the paucity of stimulation. I'm actually a real junkie for stimulation. I'm, your classic dyslexic ADHD kid that found nature because it was a place there was, as much stimulation, things to kind of observe and find and keep myself occupied.
And a place for imagination as well. Like I've noticed with my nephew Enzo that he loves Minecraft. He loves being lost in the digital realm of computer games. But when we took him to the woods, he also got lost in imagination there, because both of them are quite creative spaces. Yeah. Whereas there are often lots of environments he's required to be in that there's just no role for imagination in them, and that turns him off dramatically. So there's actually more similarity between the world of Minecraft and the woods than the classroom or suburbia, as you say.
Yeah, so children in nature is, a massive, massive passion for me in terms of actually what's the most important thing we can do in the world for the world is get children into nature. And why? Because, for the 1.24 million years we've been evolving, nature's been our classroom. Nature, and also the stewards of story, of how to narrativize and how to inspire through the storytelling of nature. For children is the place where you create enchantment and wonder, and most importantly curiosity, and all those are the vital ingredients of imagination. And so Minecraft is just borrowing from the fundamentals, and the canvas is different. And it for me, it's a lamentable thing that there is not more opportunity for children to be in nature in a way where they're held in a place of safety and given that permission. Generally, it's the adult saying, "It's dirty, don't touch that, don't climb that tree, don't take risk." So they find those opportunities to take risk in the the sort of the digital world is supposedly the safe place. Like of course it's not. It's the most corrupting and dangerous of places. You're more likely to fuck your life up forever and ever on the internet than you are by falling out of a tree. And I feel like what we need to do is reimagine how we can make opportunities for children to be in nature. Brilliant, this country, for independent small forest school and alternatives, but also how we counter the default of society to see nature as a bad place, as dirty, as almost corruptible or terrifying.
Well, fearful. I mean, in the woods when I lived there, I had one rule, because almost without fail, at a dusk or an hour past dusk, people would start making jokes about horror things because they were beginning to get scared. And I just had one rule, which is that we don't make jokes about horror stuff, because it would just rattle everybody. And I wanted to leave room for people to experience the beauty of the quiet and the dark and the glowworms that seem to appear and all the stuff that you don't know is even there. It was but it's an interesting one, especially when the night falls in the woodland, as I'm sure. I mean,
I'm leading night walks at the moment. And,
tell us about it.
Well, it's in many ways it's the most magical part of it. We're in the sanctuary of being in a group of 40 people in a long line, so there's that sense of safety. Walking on your own in the dark is a very different thing, and it's taken me years to grow the confidence. Somebody who was terrified of the dark for a long time, but as you know, it's actually one of the most powerful places, stimulating places, when you have your eyesight removed and you have to walk using your other senses. I do want to say something to this idea of fear, because of how we've exiled fear, and actually, and how fear never leaves us. We're a being that needs fear, and actually, I think that the creating of the zones of safety, the dwelling, the buildings, the locks, the doors, everything that we use to protect ourselves, fear only goes underground and reemerges and manifests in other ways, sometimes more insidiously. And there will whatever you do to protect it creeps back in like dry rot, like black mold.
Now, and I totally agree about embracing fear. What I think I've tried to protect against is not fear itself, but the projection and creative imagination and popularizing of that fear from one person who feels willing to, you get all sorts of characters out of 40 in the woods. I've never had 40 walking with me, but maybe sort of 10 at a time. Someone feels willing to project and promote a story that then gets in other people's minds unnecessarily. I think that's what I've wanted to protect against, rather than someone's fear itself. Let's bring that in and let's engage with that and walk through it. But haven't wanted to promote it.
But it's
how do you deal with it when somebody, do you ever get people going a bit sideways? And
totally. I mean, it's like, when you have about 1,500 people a year that are walking through the night. It's quite I sometimes become a bit blasé and I have to remind myself that what is happening behind me, because I'm up front, what's happening behind me is a mosaic of different reactions of some people who are going, oh my God, this is so boring. Can't we just go a bit faster and just use torches? Some people are going, this is the most amazing thing. I can't believe I've never done this. Some people are going, as a woman, I need this in my life. This is not allowed. I would be terrified to do this. Why do I live in a society where this is deprived of me? And there are some people who are terrified because they just know there's a werewolf right out there that's going to pick them off.
They've watched one too many Saw films or something.
Exactly. And there's so much going on, and there are some people who are just like, this is the most Zen thing to do, and there's so much that happens, and I should probably in the kind of, inquire into that, because the nature of it is there isn't much place for talking once it's night and once we're doing that work.
So I feel like we could talk all day about city, country, woods, getting lost, but I want to make sure we really get to the heart of this. And the first thing I'd love to do before we talk more about listening is ask you what sound you've brought with us to us today.
Shall I get it out?
Please do.
Okay.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh my goodness. It's a what?
A sruti box.
A sruti box.
It's an Indian instrument. How hold it? It's heavy.
It is heavy. Wow.
It is. It's a baby sister of the harmonium, which is connected to the old organs and accordions, and part of that valved family of bellowed reeded instruments.
Wow.
And
how old is that?
I've had this one for about 15, 16 years.
Okay.
It's a bit knackered, this one.
It looks like it could be from the 1800s. I mean, it's got this sort of real heritage to it.
They're not that old, but the story I kind of like to tell, I'm not sure how true it is that when the British colonizers went out to India and took their accordions and the harmoniums, the organs, and they fell to sort of rust in the sun, the Indian population there took them apart and reinvented them into the harmonium that you see in kind of devotional, in Sufi or
or even music. Yoga practice. Sometimes you see them there, don't you?
Exactly. It's become a very common instrument, and that as part of the singing with the rags. And then the shruti is a kind of more portable, smaller one that doesn't have piano keys but has the valves that you open up to let the sound. So this is white keys, black keys of the piano equivalent.
So these are the black ones and these are the white ones.
Yeah. So this is G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G.
And you push them to the side, or how do you?
So you open them up, and that lets air out, and that passes over the reed and produces a sound.
Oh, wow.
So I will do the most basic, which is just one octave of G and G.
Let's create a little bit more room back here.
That's all good. This is.
Wow. I mean, may I have a quick go before if you do the air, could I just try the valve?
Sure.
I just want to try the valve. So open and then close.
Yeah, if you want the note to stop.
Oh, that was a goodie. That was a good one.
It's a good chord there.
That was a bit abrupt. It is so beautiful. The thing I noticed, and I'm no connoisseur of sound, not yet at least, but I noticed there's like a texture to the sound that almost sounds like grainy or something like I can't really describe it better than saying grainy and texturized in a sense that in a way that I've not heard a sound before. And I'm not sure if that makes any sense to you at all when I say that. Or
what I hear in that is it's got an organicness to it, an unfiltered kind of like the bottom of the apple juice that you've pressed, and it's got all the bits.
Yes,
the organicness to it. Does that sound?
It does. That
like
speaks
it?
right to it. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, what it is, it's it's not perfectly tuned.
Oh, it sounded pretty good to me.
Well, it does because you're not.
I'm not finely tuned. Yeah,
no, I love it because it's my voice is not bang on. Nobody, few people are. When you play that with a concert tune piano, you suddenly hear how wonky that instrument is.
Yeah.
But actually, I love that because it the harmonics within the sound are so rich, and when you bring notes together, the harmonies that created, when it's not perfectly clean, create the incidental, and within that is it's like the corona of the sound. It feels very otherworldly, quite spiritual, close to prayer, and I think actually that it's that sound that penetrates so much into why it's an instrument that is so associated with devotional music.
Two sort of technical questions for laymen who aren't tuned in as well, like me, about harmonics and the corona. You said
those are more illustrative words than they were technical words.
Poetic license in there.
Well, corona is though like the kind of when the solar eclipse happens and you have this kind
like
of
a halo effect.
The halo, that's something that if you can imagine sonically is there, and
because I've seen harmonics on a guitar where someone sort of hovers their finger higher up the string and plucks what would be a low E, and somehow it creates a higher sound, but not because they're pressing down on it. That's the only engagement I have with the concept of harmonics, but the way I would try to express it in like non-technical ways, poetic license, at least layman poetic license, is that sometimes the way notes are formed, they sort of hold other notes within them that sort of all seem to belong.
Well, every sound does, apart from pure tone.
Right.
And I'll give you a good example, and it's interesting because when I do my work with Nightingales and sing with Nightingales, it's harmonics that is what it's the sruti box on harmonics. It's the first thing I do to make contact with them, because their voice is very close to pure tone. It's the nature of birdsong. It's very clean in a way that our voices have got so much resonance and different frequencies going on. Is why you can recognize people's voices. As each one's got a fingerprint in terms of that.
So not just the dominant note that I'm speaking on here, but within that there might be a bunch of smaller notes that to your subconscious ear you're like, that's Dave.
Yeah, wow, absolutely.
I didn't realise.
So I'm going to give you an example of harmonics and pure tone by doing overtone singing. I'll just do a little bit. Please. And what you'll hear is I'm holding a drone, but then the whistle comes through, which is the pure, like on the string if you impress on at certain intervals. And I will move that harmonic, so you'll hear the harmonic scale that is there within every sound, but is sort of smudged in. So what I'm doing is artificially expressing them to make them more notable. And you do it like this. So those are harmonics.
I actually only just heard it at the end.
Oh, right.
That's interesting. That's interesting, isn't it? As in,
work on it then.
No. It's me. I think it is literally me tuning in. So I was hearing the low frequency, the low sound, kind of changing the note or the expression of it at least. But then just about 10 seconds before the end, I suddenly heard the harmonics of it.
The whistle,
the whistle coming through. So was that there the whole time?
Yeah. So I'll do a little bit more and I'll show you.
I'm going to have to watch that back on the video and see whether it's my ear or what.
Oh
but
yeah,
that's
no, it is,
fascinating.
because it's such it's so alien.
Do you think it'll come through on video, on the
yeah.
recording?
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, totally, it does.
Interesting.
I'll do it once more and I'll use my finger to indicate the
Please.
movement.
Okay, so I had it from almost at the beginning that time, but it did get much clearer again still. And I don't know if that's me dialing in or whether that's you dialing in or
squeezing tighter, actually.
I see.
It's quite hard to do early in the morning without warming up.
That's incredible though. So are you actively making both the low and the high sounds?
Yep.
Yeah, you are. Okay.
Yeah.
Is this a difficult thing to learn? Is this because you're a singer for a living?
People, actually, I was doing harmonic singing before I realised I was a singer and learning songs. So I've done it for years and years because I'd heard it from Mongolian overtone singing.
Right.
And luckily have a voice that does it quite naturally. Some people just can do it. Some people, it takes a lot of YouTube videos and a lot of learning.
So you mentioned about the Nightingales, and I've got your book here from before, which is beautiful and obviously focuses on the Nightingale as the my mum gave me this book, which is
so I'm looking at the other book, not mine.
A Year of Birdsong, and there's a nice bit in there that I put a bookmark in about nightingales. And why, out of all the bird songs, have you fallen in love with, if that's true to say, with the Nightingale?
I'm not the only one who's fallen in love with the Nightingale.
Yes.
I sing on the shoulders of millennia of devotees, artists, mythic makers, poets, writers who have seen the Nightingale as the principal muse for artists, because they are the most virtuosic and the most mysterious, the most illustrious, seductive, lustful night birds that sing in the dark of the night like the best of artists do when they come alive. You know, everything about their whole world is so identifiable for the romantic. I couldn't believe that as I was falling in love with them that nobody had written a book about the bird, being how important they are, and they've sort of fallen not into obscurity but out of visibility because of the nature of them being so rare and such a precarious dweller in this country, bird that's going extinct very fast.
Because of how we're using the country?
Multiple things, Deer populations, intensive agriculture, housing developments, insecticides, particularly issues of their migration, depending on habitats in Africa. Deer populations is the big one as well.
Am I right in thinking that some songbirds have a very simple couple of notes, simple pattern that they repeat over and over?
No, none have simple patterns.
Okay.
Every bird song is complex.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
But I was going to go and say, which may also be completely fictitious, that there's something like 200 different notes or expressions that a nightingale can make, which is part of what you're saying about them being the most virtuoso.
Yeah, it's 200 up to 250 different phrases.
Wow.
And within those phrases are up to about 1,500 sounds.
Oh my goodness.
So their repertoire is enormous, but also they're improvisers, which in a way that's very human. We recognize the fact they are actively never singing the same thing twice, but using motifs and lead motifs that are familiar. But a wren or a skylark has even more detail and complexity in some ways, though maybe a bit more regularity. But if you slow down birdsong and you start listening even to a blackbird or a song thrush, you realize there's such richness in detail in information, more than we'll ever understand, because they're also working at other levels that we don't yet know how to decode.
Well, at Birdsong 101, we have 3 mics in this podcast. We have your mic, my mic, and we stick one on the roof.
Yay.
And that is our bird feed. And I sent off to one of the guys in my team the recording from the first podcast that we did a few weeks ago. And he ran it through one of the apps, I think Merlin ID from Cornell. And take a guess at how many species of birds were present in the first 90-minute conversation that we had here.
What time of year was it?
This was 4 weeks ago.
Okay. I'm going to say 33.
Not bad. It was 25.
Okay.
25 species of bird. I thought, because one of the reasons we went yes to this place was the big tree, and the other reason was the bird song and the quality of quiet and silence that lies underneath that. And I saw one of your things you said where the nightingales are decorators of silence, which I thought was a beautiful phrase. And so yes, it's not just about the silence, but the quiet and the bird song coming in on top of that. But I still thought there might be 4 or 5 species. You're obviously deeply attuned to the complexity and the variety, but you had a much better guess than I. And I was astounded when it was 25 different species of bird.
Yeah, but actually it could be that there's lots more than that. It's just at every point, midday, a lot of birds might be at rest, not singing, or elsewhere feeding. And, you know, if you did that podcast at 5 o'clock in the morning,
dawn chorus
is like wearing very thick silicone earplugs at the moment to deny myself that I do one night when I get there with the dawn chorus, because it's, you know, break a good mic. Are
you camping? Are you in a shepherd's hut?
No, I live in a bell tent. Yeah.
In a bell tent, nice.
Yeah. But I mean, I'm sure there's lots more birds, and 4 weeks ago, a lot of the migratory visitors might not have arrived yet either. Yeah. So it's increasing. There are still birds that haven't arrived. I haven't heard the cuckoos yet. That will just, I'm sure if you're lucky, you'll have a cuckoo around here.
How long is the nightingale window?
Well, it's about 8 to 9 weeks.
Before they go to Africa?
No, before they stop singing. Sorry, the window of song.
Yes, that is what I meant.
Yeah. They start singing immediately when they get here, which this year was about the kind of 3rd, 4th of April was actually early. And they're in full song right now. It's incredible. Usually it's last year was very different. And they stop singing around beginning of June. It's the males that haven't found mates, and they just sort of give up, basically. Yeah.
And, you know, it's not just called the listening podcast, it's listening with. And I think with is something I'm passionate about. Co-creativity, how we entangle ourselves with others, humans and other species and nature itself. And am I right in thinking that you do something of a duet with the Nightingales? And you mentioned they're improvisers and that it's not just a script that they're speaking from, but is there something of that? And what can you speak to about that?
Well, they are very social and very interactive birds. And right now what we're hearing is 3 males quite close to each other that are passing songs backwards and forwards. So they're imitating each other and like transmitting. It's, you know, you can hear there's an obvious deep listening. The nature of their song is that they sing, and then they stop and listen. But they're listening as they go. And so there's a lot of replication and unison singing between them. It's very incredible. They also know what each other is singing, because they'll sometimes latch on and sing exactly the same thing at the same time. So there's deep intelligence. But when they hear human musicians, they incorporate us into their song, and they will very much augment and start to acknowledge our tuning and our rhythms and that sort of thing.
And so is it a sonic game of tennis where you propose
it's couple
something?
Dancing.
It's couple dancing.
Yeah. It's not so much tennis.
Is that because you don't like the game metaphor?
The oppositional.
I see. Well, I've spent quite a lot of time doing couple tennis. Well, I've spent a lot of time playing tennis. I've also spent a lot of time doing couples dancing. And when I lived on the West Coast in California, I ended up doing switch dancing the blues in the West Coast blues tradition. So not the East Coast Lindy Hop bouncy, but the kind of the smoother, flatter, more straight lines. But they've been developing this sort of switch dancing, which I think might be most appropriate metaphorically, in the sense that you both approach the dance open. There is no designated lead or follow.
Great.
So there is no sense of, I have the plan and you have to follow the plan. we approach it. Like, this conversation is different because you're coming on the podcast, but, you know, as we walked to the tree, there's no plan, there's no nothing. It's just, you can ask a question, I may ask you a question back, you may answer it, I might answer it, whatever. We can go in any direction we like. And what happens with that is a sort of, the lead does grow, because if I want to do a drop with someone, I need to definitely in that moment be in control and have to make it safe. But then when we come out of that move, it gets gentle and light, and there's space and there's silence, if you like, and then they may take me some other direction. And I wonder maybe if that is more sort of an appropriate metaphor for how you go about
very much
dancing with the Nightingales.
The thing is, it's different every night because you have a different musician, and everyone comes from their own discipline and training, and that's part of the excitement, part of the lottery as well. My dance tradition was Bond improv, so very much that same sort of like where one is taking dominance and leadership, and then also into submissive and being the follower, and how one is guided. And with a Nightingale, you know, there's a stylistic there, so you're very much within you're honoring their skill and their methods and their approach. And I always say to the musicians that you remain human. Don't imitate. It's not, you're not trying to pretend to be a Nightingale. Stay within your humanness, but become a bit Nightingale and allow the Nightingale to be a bit human. And I think that's kind of what I'm trying to create within that space of a reciprocity where the bird is able to, where you and the bird are able to dissolve that sense of separateness for all of us, for all the listeners. Yeah.
That's amazing. I can't wait to come. And I've literally been hobbling around. This is the first time I've made it properly out and about past the corner shop. So I can't wait to come and experience it. Should we have a cup of tea? And then we'll get into the real talk about what is listening.
Okay, yes, let's.
A sweet, quick cup of tea.
As you guys know, this show is only possible because of the support from our partners. Vivo Barefoot have been our founding partner of the Listening With podcast, and this is a little bit more about them. They're on a quest to become a net positive business for regeneration of human and planetary health. Vivo Barefoot also runs ReVivo, the first of its kind secondary market for professionally reconditioned footwear to keep them on feet and away from landfills. And the Live Barefoot Fund, an in-house impact hub catalyzing mission-aligned innovation, research and advocacy programs. See the latest Unfinished Business Impact Report to learn more on what it takes to create a regenerative business. I love these guys. They really walk the talk, no pun intended. The shoes are amazing and really do help us both stay protected and get close to the land. Thank you so much for supporting. And now we'll take you back to Listening with Sam Lee.
To get down and dirty with it, listening, the theme. What? Yeah, that was. Do you know what that was? I don't know what that was. Pheasant. Oh yeah, we do have a cheeky pheasant running around here. Yeah. What is listening to you? Because obviously everything to me, everything you're doing, sound, birds, nature, but is all about it. But what is listening to you? How do you start with that?
It's such a hard question. That what is listening? I mean, it's one of our oldest senses. So you know, listening is the sense we can't shut our ears. You know, voluntarily without really trying hard. It's the what, you know, between ear and nose. It's the sense that never sleeps in a way, or does last one to go to sleep. So listening is our it's a great gift if you have that capability. It's one that can be lost. Listening is something that will access you to many different worlds, to connect you in to the vibrations, the resonances of what's around us. It's our way of receiving the health, the wealth of the world around us. It's our broker of relationship making. It's not the only one, you know, but it affects us in such a powerful way. It's you know, it is ultimately working purely on vibration, and has listening. Interestingly, in the evolution of species, making sound was a very dangerous thing. And once we started we as in like life forms started becoming sound makers, it makes you very vulnerable. So listening is our way of sensing where threat is. We had to evolve the ability to hear as quickly as we were to create vibration. So it is about protection. It's about sustainably. It's about survival. It's also for us humans. It's very much about a giving. I think that there's a reciprocity in listening that is very important, because if you're in the presence of somebody else and you give them your ears and you give them your time to pay attention, it's an enormous gift. It's also very powerful. Those who listen furthest know the most.
Those who listen furthest.
Deepest.
I like that.
Yeah, and it's a skill. You have to learn how to listen. It's not just something that is done automatic. There's an art to listening.
Is it something you have actively cultivated in your own life? Like, have you set about it, or do you consider yourself to be a good listener? I would imagine, but
I mean, yeah, it's been. I have a very interesting relationship with listening, because I lost the sight in one of my eyes when I was quite young.
Wow.
So my hearing became ever more pronounced, such that my left ear pops out in sympathy with the left eye that I lost to receive more. I'm a bit of a, you know, as a lot of musicians or artists are, I'm a super sensor. So actually my strongest sense is my nose.
Really?
I'm a very, very nose-led.
My wife's like that. Sniffer dog.
Sniffer dog, yeah.
Yeah, I've had to get really good at taking the bins out because I had no idea. No idea.
That's why I was asking if I could have a shower here earlier on.
Well, you're lucky. I'm nose dumb, so you're absolutely
right.
You got the woods. You know.
Yeah, wood smoke covers all.
Exactly. The must.
But listening for me was my apprenticeship into folk music. Learning to be a musician was about learning to listen. Most importantly, it's not about projection, about how I can sound as good or sing as loud or nicely. It's about listening. So I spent 15 years going out recording songs of the last of the Gypsy Traveller community after my teacher Stanley had shown me that there were still people out there who knew the old songs. I went song collecting, and that meant I spent 15 years regularly sitting in the company of elders with my recording device, listening to their lives, listening to their songs. And so I've spent, I always say you are given 2 ears and 1 mouth, and you misuse them in that proportion. That for me is a great mantra of how we have to be better listeners and do the ratios. Here I am chatting away, but you can do both at the same time.
Yeah.
The great hunter-gatherer people that I've met, I've spent time in company with a lot of indigenous people who depend on their aural capabilities, will hear so much. They'll say, that pheasant is just done that cluck because ... Not much you can read into a pheasant, when they're fighting with males, and when one's trying to jump on the back of a female. But listening to birdsong has been a great teacher of listening, because you can hear so much detail in what the conversations are happening between species and within species.
I think that's one of the takeaways for me in our conversation so far. Obviously, we're just cracking the door open here, but is the level of depth and detail and nuance that it's so obvious to you, but to me, you're drawing me into that. That's all new to me. Like a connoisseur showing you the difference in wines. You just think, I like a bit of white plonk, and they're showing you, oh, actually, no, this and that. And once you've shown it, once you've seen it, once you've heard it, and you can see it, taste it, it's there now. And so that opens the door for me to pay more attention, to see what more these bird songs that we're recording can tell us, not just about the quantity of species of birds, but maybe what that might begin over time to tell us about this place and how it connects to other places in Africa or NEP or anywhere else at all.
Well, totally. I mean, what when you say you have 25 species, well, every species of bird needs a very, very specific set of criteria in its environment to be able to survive. And that'll be from the insect life to the, what their food source is ultimately. There's also materials where the places they habitat, they can nest, they can find safety. So if you look at what those insects need, they'll need a specific type of soil type or foliage type. So you go, oh, you've got reed warbler, or you've got garden warbler, or you've got blackcap, or you've got nightingale. Well, instantly from that bird, you can say, oh, well, then there's probably this species of plants and flora and this amount of invertebrates, because you need that amount to survive that. And if you've got loads of them, that means you've got so a bird song is already an indicator into health of land and variety in land. So the birds have been our communicators in that sense. If you listen to a bird song and how the health of a bird, how many there are, all those sorts of different things, and listening depth, you can almost guarantee. I mean, there's so many stories of how birds have been indicators of opportunity. The honey guide birds in Kenya and other parts of Africa that will lead the humans to the honeycomb, because they know there will be a portion gifted to the bird if we can access the hive. And this is an ancient relationship. Many wonderful examples of that. But birds are telling us so much knowledge. I also, as a musician, I didn't train in music. I didn't have any music lessons. And, I go and make an album, and I'm in the mixing, the studio mixing a record, and you're listening to minute details in terms of frequency and composition and arrangement and relationship and sonic kind of, the holistic field, and I make albums that are, they're not thin, they're pretty wealthy, fulsome arrangements.
They're powerful.
Thank you. And why? Because I love hearing that depth that you hear in a place like NEP. If you go to NEP, which is a rewilded site, then you hear the how that land holds such a larger biomass. Look, there's more pound of feathers in NEP than there are in the 40 square kilometers of land around put together in that small estate. So that's telling us something.
You've cracked open some portals for us, which I really appreciate. But just as we come into land, I guess one practical question, and then a thought about how can people connect more with you. If someone's listening to this and they've never come across any of what you're talking about, this sort of relationship with birds and connecting and listening as a sort of something in the front of their mind, I wonder what might be an interesting practice to offer someone, a challenge for them to try and do that might stimulate or cultivate that which they might not be paying attention to.
Well, I mean, I intrinsically want to say take the phone away, but they're a beautiful sword, and they cut both ways, and they can be very powerful. If you want to learn birdsong, the Merlin ID app, as you mentioned, is brilliant for that. It really shows what's there. I don't know if it always incentivizes people to grow a sense of familiarity and learning unless you're regularly doing it. There are better ways of starting to learn your birdsong, and the phone is brilliant for that by listening to isolated birdsong. So that's a really good thing one can do to start to grow your repertoire, starting with your blackbirds and your song thrushes and wrens and robins that are the very common ones, but also beautiful ones.
But it is quite different learning to categorize, learning how to sort of attach a label to a sound, than it is to actually cultivate the
the ability to pay the attention to actually hear the sound. Like when you did those harmonics earlier, there was no labeling involved. It wasn't trying to tell you what is that note or something. It was just, can I actually hear?
Yeah.
Pay attention to the frequency that's up there somewhere that you're putting out. And I wonder how people actually cultivate that muscle almost.
Yeah. Practice and familiarity. It's like you go to another country and you don't understand the language, and you listen and eventually, you know, with work you can start to identify words and learn them, and you can claim them, and then you can start to, it's the jigsaw puzzle, isn't it? You empty the box and it's a noise, but suddenly you start putting the pieces together, and as they build relationship with them, an image starts to appear, and from that image you can actually conject a little bit more of what the bigger image is, and the bigger image, and the more you put together, the story behind that I really like is about when making relationship with the natural world, it's about making threads. Every time that you're out there and you stop and you listen to the robin at the end of the branch, you've created a thread between you of that robin, and the next day you do it again with that same robin or another robin, and you've created another thread, and you put those threads together and that thread becomes like twine, and you put those twines together and that becomes string, and you bring that string together and it becomes cord, and then that cord becomes rope. And what that is a inseparable connection, because you've done the work in building those bonds, so they've evolved in something that actually holds you also accountable. And this is for me actually the political side of this, and which is the most important part of it, is that relationship isn't just about you becoming a better birdsong ID person. It's about you going, I have a responsibility for that robin, and when that robin isn't there, I am poorer for it. But because I've accepted robin and I have now robin's become part of my life, I want to protect robin. We can't protect what we don't love, and we can't love what we don't know. So, and it's not just about robin, it's about the river at the bottom of the land. It's about that little hedgerow that the developer wants to cut down for new houses, that is actually a sanctuary for many other species. It's all the places where those small little beauties that are desperately rare and precarious and clinging on for dear life, even though they sing a sweet song. It's the wren. That they are part of our jurisdiction that need our support. And this goes hand in hand with the whole idea about what permission is to be on the land, and why do we not know wren from robin, from blackbird, from song thrush? Because we don't have lives that have been designed to incorporate nature. They've been designed to exclude nature. And there are good reasons for that, but there are also bad reasons for that. And part of it is about a societal way that we've been denied, deprived, and actually told we are not welcome. No trespassers, you will be prosecuted. These are strong, familiar statements that create severance, and we have to find a way of brokering a reconnection. And that is slowly happening through romantic endeavours like Singing with Nightingales, like rewilding projects in NEP and other places, but also needs to happen through legal work and also through governmental projects to actually start to reawaken, re-enchant and make permissive the fact that we need robin and wren in our lives. We need to know who they are. They are part of our identity, and were we to lose them, it's not just about it being a bit quieter. It's actually, as I believe very strongly, and as I've written in one of my songs, that their precariousness is an indicator of our precariousness, that it's about our own survival, because they are the canaries in the coal mine of what's really happening in the environment, not just another road destroying a bit of a habitat. It's about actually what does ecocide, what does extinction really feel like. It sounds first like no more robins in your hedge, no more nightingales in your hedge, then it's no this, then it's no that, then it's no crop, then it's no corn, then it's no wheat,
and then it comes for you.
We are all part of it. So it sounds doom mongering and dark, but actually it's what knowing these songs is about our resilience. And that is something we don't realize, how unresilient we are as individuals, and dependent. We are dependent, and that isn't taught and that isn't spoken about. So we just have to go back to the land, as you're doing here, and create a sense of self-sufficiency. And that means so many things. It's not just about growing potatoes. It's about being sufficient with what we have, and being able to have your 3 acres and a cow.
And
as
finding
enough.
those threads.
Yeah.
And finding those threads again. Sam, it's so good. It's so good. And if we could plot the map, it's all over the place where what we've covered today. We've been on quite a journey, and that's just in an hour and a half. What you've just got a new album out. You've got a book which is here. It's been out for a while, hasn't it? This one.
You got the hard copy.
Yeah.
Can't get that anymore.
Really? It's beautiful. The new album, I was blasting it on the way here. It's amazing. The song about place. Meeting is a
pleasant place.
Meeting is a pleasant place.
Yeah.
I don't have time to ask you about that now, but what a beautiful song that is, and what a value it puts on the present. In how I see it, anyway. As you share that song, we'll talk about that another time, hopefully. How can people connect with you?
On Instagram, obviously.
Not on Friend Feed, on Friendster. Not anymore. Not MySpace. No, Instagram. What do you?
Stanley Song.
Stanley Song.
But find me in the forest. Come to sing with Nightingales.
Is there room? Is there still room in any of the gigs? In any of the immersions?
15 places left for this year.
15 places.
But there's next year, and there's other things that I do.
Yeah.
Come to my concerts, because they are me invoking nature in
city
space.
Or country?
Gigs in the city. Yeah, I mean, I'll be playing London in June the 13th,
Okay.
at Hackney Round Chapel. Just keep in touch, and I mean, as much so that I can share the things that I think are important to be aware of, and the other worlds that I'm encountering of other people doing this good work. And yeah, there are many ways to help lead me as well, not just follow me.
Do you go to other people's farms? Like, is there any way in which people can hire you, or is it only the what you put out in your gigs?
I'm a gun for hire. I'm a musician. I'll go where people invite me, and I gig around the UK and a lot in Europe as well. I'm at the moment working on a harvest home tour of regenerative farms this autumn, which I'm trying to put together quite last minute, as ability to take the songs that I've been making back to the land and support the enterprises, the regenerative farms, the community agricultural schemes that are doing the good work of nature-friendly farming and trying to get us as a more organic and nature-engaged country. So that's something I'm working on, but that's not public yet. But keep an eye out for those sorts of those are the gigs I love the most.
So Stanley Song is the best portal to find your other portals.
Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah. Thank you so much for coming to be with me.
Thank you, Dave, for having me.
Talk with us and open the doors into this whole world of listening with Nightingales and everything else we've touched. And for Stanley, what a gift that was as well. So really appreciate that.
Bless you. Well done here as well. It's a beautiful place, and it's got potential.
Yeah, we're just getting going. We're just getting going. Until next time.